Welcome, everybody, to a webinar tonight on preparing for a job interview. So, I see we have a lot of new people on tonight, and that's great. I hope all of you have some interviews lined up. And if not, I hope that situation changes for you soon. Just so you know, all attendees are muted by default. And so, depending on how many people we end up having on by the end of the webinar, if we have a lot of questions, but just a few people, we might be able to open up the lines. Otherwise, you can type questions in, and I'll go through that in a moment in a little bit more detail. Okay, first, a little bit of housekeeping. We are recording, so if we do open up the lines and have people speak or ask questions, please keep in mind that your voice may be recorded and may be posted on a website somewhere. So be cautious of the words you use. I always tell people don't say anything that you wouldn't want to see on the news at 5 o'clock tomorrow. And it's not quite that bold, but it's a good guideline just to be careful. Which, as you'll hear, we talk a little bit about that in regards to preparing for a job interview as well with your social media platforms and that sort of thing. In the control panel, you'll see a section for questions. It's above the chat section. So you might see chat at the bottom, and then polls, and then questions. If you have any questions while we're discussing a particular subject, feel free to type it in, and I'll keep an eye open for new questions that are coming in, and I will try to answer those while we're still talking about that particular subject. If we don't get to all of the questions during the hour that we have together, which is nowhere near enough time, which is one of the reasons I'm doing this one multiple times, is just submit them anyway, and I'll get back to everyone. The webinar system keeps a log of all questions, and I'll be able to get back to everybody after the webinar and respond individually. Our agenda for this evening, we're going to talk a little bit about interview prep, opening the interview, the right way to get it started, which is half the battle, the information exchange, closing the interview, and then post-interview follow-up. We're going to be spending a lot of time on prep and research because that's where most of the work is done. When you think about it, the interview itself, especially the first interview, is normally not more than an hour, hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours, depending on the situation and how many candidates they have to interview. And so for you to make the best impression you can make in that hour, you need to be as prepared as you can possibly be. Not just on how to interview, but really doing all of your research, all of your homework on the organization, the individuals, finding out everything you possibly can about that company and the people that you'll be meeting with before you get there. A little bit about my background before we get too far along. Some people wonder why I do these things and these webinars particularly, and you'll hear me talking about things from so many different backgrounds that it might not even sound like the same person. But to give you a little bit of my background, I currently develop websites and technology platforms, a lot of them for trade associations, nonprofit organizations, government agencies, a lot of, well, for example, Marin Sanitary Services that does all the recycling, and they've got a zero waste mission up in Marin County is one of my clients. Napa County is one of my clients. I also serve on the boards of numerous organizations, including the National Recycling Coalition, the U.S. Zero Waste Business Council, and I'm an advisor to the board of the CRRA, the California Resource Recovery Association, as well as on the advisory board of Rock the Earth and a couple of other organizations related to sustainability and zero waste initiatives. Before doing this, I owned and operated an executive search firm that I started in Chicago approximately, well, I guess 16 years ago now. I grew the firm from scratch after working for another firm for a couple of years and rising to the level of vice president in that firm. I jumped out and started my own, and within a couple of years, we were the largest in the country in metals and manufacturing. And so I've, over the years, accumulated this vast network of literally more than 1 million people in my database from all my recruiting years, and now doing technology, and and recyclingjobs.com is one of my platforms. So I've got a background in technology and executive recruiting, And really, when I say executive recruiting, we were doing positions from entry level professionals on up through CEO. So it wasn't just executive level, but it was all professional level. And I taught, I don't know, probably 150 or 200 companies how to interview and hire people. And so my position before was from the perspective of the employer and as an advocate for the employer. One thing that people should know about recruiters, when you go out to get a job, a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm going to find a recruiter and send them my resume, and that's going to probably find me a job." Well, that's generally not the case, and it's just a matter of the odds and the math, and you should know how recruiters work too, because the more information you have, the better you can manage your whole search practice, or your job search practice. So, and I don't want to get too far off on this, but it is important to know when you're preparing or going out and looking for a job and where to outlook to. Recruiters are hired by companies to find the best person they can find for that job. And so I used to talk with probably on average 100 to 200 people to fill one position. And the positions they companies go to a recruiter to fill are generally very, very specific. So a company might come to me and say, I want I'd like to talk with the top five salespeople in the country that are selling a particular line of rolled, flat or rolled stainless steel in certain widths into certain industries. And so if I just say, hey, I'm a metals recruiter, and I get resumes from 500 or 1,000 people a month that are in the industry, the odds of them being one of those people that fit the description with that exact product line in those exact markets are pretty slim. So it doesn't hurt to get in the database, but it's not a good return on investment of time working through recruiters that way. But because I did that so often and taught so many companies how to recruit people, I can now help candidates, and that's what I spend most of my time doing now, rather than helping companies. So getting hired is a sales job. That's the main thing to think about as the overall perspective of going into the position. Now, it's not a sales job like you might think of selling a used car or something like that. This is more of a consultative sale. And a consultative sale, as any of you have been consultants know, is about going in and really helping a client understand their problems and their needs, and then finding a solution, helping them work to find a solution to those needs. In this case, you are that solution. And so what we're doing is going in and talking with the company or an organization, trying to understand what their needs are, what the needs of the position are, and then presenting yourself as the solution to fit those needs. And in doing that, you need to have credibility, build trust, relationship, and try to get a feel for the culture of the organization as well. Well, there are a lot of different ways to do that these days, fortunately. A lot of tools out there, and we're going to talk a bit about that too, because that's where all of the research comes in. So step one is research, and step two is marketing and getting yourself out there, and then step three is closing the deal, and that's generally where the interview comes into play. Often not the first one, and when I talk about the first interview you have is really kind of an introductory interview, and it's often just a feeling out process to see whether or not you feel like you could work with the organization and let the organization get a feel for whether or not there's some chemistry there with you. And that's important to do, but you want to make sure that you make a good enough impression and have the right skill sets even coming up to the table to make sure that you get to the second interview. And a lot of whether or not that happens is dependent on how well you prepare. And so when you're going out to a company, I mean, there's a lot to consider. Companies they don't often spend enough time, but they should spend a lot of time preparing for an interview and looking through a candidate's resume, trying to find out as much as they can about their background. One of the things they're going to do as a part of that process is go into uh, the your Facebook page, your LinkedIn page, everything that they can find on you to get additional information. and you of course need to do the same with them, with each one of the people that you might be interviewing with. Other places where you can get information, if it's a publicly held company, look at their SEC filings, which are generally available through a number of different online resources. You can look at press releases, anything that they've put out, not only on their site, which is likely to include only the positive things, but also do your research through the Associated Press. If you've got access to like Lexis, the legal research tools, which some of you may have access to, Nexus through your schools, and so look any place where you can find business or investment information is where you want to go to do some research on the company. You're going to want to know a lot more than most candidates think about when they come in for an interview. It's not just about the company interviewing you, it's about you interviewing the company. And too often candidates walk in thinking, oh, I hope I get the job, but they don't do a good enough job deciding if that's really the right fit for them. And if you do, it's going to help you because clients are, I still think of these hiring companies as my clients, but the hiring manager is going to have more respect for a person who comes in and seems to be well prepared, asking good questions, thoughtful questions that are relevant to the work content, and uh, and and not intimidated by the interviewer in any way. So you want to be respectful, of course, but make sure you come in with some good questions. Some of those questions, well, I'll hold off on that because we're going to get into that in a little bit later in more detail about the particular types of questions, not only that you're likely to be asked, but also just as important or possibly more so, the questions that you can ask. Use press releases. Google obviously is a good option, and not just doing a search on Google, but setting up Google alerts. And I'll show you how to do that too here shortly before we get off the phone this evening. Business reports, as I mentioned, Hoover's is a good place to get things. Business journals and trade publications. So if you are interested in finding a career in a particular industry, you should be up to speed overall on what's going on with that industry. And I don't know where all of you are in your careers. Some people are coming into the whole sustainability movement for the first time. Others have been in the field for a long time and are just looking for new opportunities or chances to do new things. But you need to get up to speed as much as you can on what's going on overall in the big picture of the industry that the target client company is in. So if you can go online, and it's all about networking anyway. I mean, we're talking about interview preparation tonight, but what gets you to the interview is first, of course, networking and getting your resume in front of the right person or your bio. Uh, the people who are really good and are good at networking and getting jobs often don't even ever need a resume because they've always got a good network and their next job lined up before they are even thinking about leaving the first one. But trade publications are a good place to go. Look online for any types of uh, websites that seem to have a lot of activity, and of course, LinkedIn, Facebook. Join the appropriate job search groups and that sort of thing. And that's where we're going to get a lot of our research information as well. And we'll look at some of that tonight. Interviewers. Remember, you're not really interviewing with a company. You're interviewing with people. And those are who you have to connect with. You're not there to impress the company. You're there to impress the people that are interviewing you. And so a lot of that, and it's not just impressing them, of course, but showing them that you're really qualified for the position and that you're someone that they would want to work with. Very important things. I always used to train my clients not to hire on chemistry because that's what most companies do. And again, they don't do it intentionally. It's more just a matter of human nature. If you meet someone, you spend a little bit of time with them, you enjoy that time together, and you find yourself smiling and talking and feeling good about the business and feeling good about the situation every time they leave the room, then you're going to probably tend to want to hire them more than somebody who might come in who had straight A's out of MIT or some other great school and excelled in their past positions, but they're so, I don't know, just boring and they don't look good and they don't present themselves well, and it just it doesn't feel right. When they leave, you think, oh, impressive resume, but there's not much there, not much more. You're going to tend to want to hire the person that you like the best. So I used to teach companies, and we put systems together to avoid that because that's how companies make most hiring mistakes. They're higher on chemistry. Now, I think that needs to be there also. So we used to talk about chemistry and we would talk about skills up to a certain point as threshold level skills. Because beyond the basic skills, what companies should be hiring for are what we call core competencies or behavioral competencies. And these are things that are slightly different in technical terms, but basically, if you think about a behavioral interview, which is what most of the larger companies or organizations that have been trained in interviewing are using these days, in a variety of formats, but it all basically comes down to the same thing. And when you'll know if you're in the middle of an interview of this type, if people are asking a lot of questions about examples. So give me an example. The interview questions are coming down the line of give me an example of a time when you did A, B, and C, or tell me about a time when you had to you faced this situation and had to solve it. Well, what they're doing is you, if you're on the hiring side, the way you determine your needs for the position are to look at who's been successful in the position in the past, who's not been, why, and try to identify the specific skills that are needed. And they might be some soft skills like ability to work with individual team members in a diverse set of departments, ranging from sales to engineering to design and PR. It might be that they were lacking a particular technical skill, or that it was the opposite. They need somebody who can just sit and work by themselves without a lot of direction and not need a team around them. So you don't know those things until you ask those questions. So uh, these are some of the things that you want to frame out and start getting a feel for as early as possible in the process, so that you're answering questions the right way. Um, Sometimes an interviewer will ask a question in a particular way that leads you to a particular answer that's not necessarily true for you, but one that you felt led to by the question, because the question was a leading question. But it might not be the answer they were looking for either. You can't count on them knowing what they were looking for. So, and then asking the right question. So we'll talk a little bit about how to get to that as well, and how to turn questions around if you don't quite understand them or know what they're looking for or how to answer the question, while at the same time not appearing to be too coy or diversing, averting the question and not answering them. But each individual that you want to ask when you're going, if you're going to have an interview, please ask for the names of the people that you'll be meeting and their positions in the companies. Now, sometimes you don't need to ask for those positions in the companies because you can just look them up. The less you have to ask for, the better, because you don't ever want to be a burden on the person who's trying to set up the interview for you, um, or in some other way introducing you or facilitating the process. But ask who the other interviewers are going to be. And then before you get in there, uh, write their names down, type their names out into a document that you keep on your laptop. This is for your eyes only, but put down the names of the interviewers, and then go to their Facebook pages, their LinkedIn pages. I would not recommend initially connecting to all of them, because that might look a little bit out of place unless you do it with intention and totally openly. Um, so you might want to put a note in, first of all, keep in mind that LinkedIn is your resume these days. 90% of it, and probably better. I mean, a resume is kind of a backup for somebody who doesn't have a LinkedIn account. And if any of you don't have LinkedIn accounts, we're going to look at those a little bit this evening as well. And I do hope that you will set one up, because it's far more impactful and useful than a resume these days. Okay, so Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Google the name and email address of the interviewers. And here's another thing you can find out a good source of information is look for any past conferences that they've attended. A lot of times, if you Google somebody's name, if they've presented somewhere, they'll come up on that organization's archives. so you can go in and take a look at what their presentation was and see where they stand, where the area of expertise is, what are the things they're passionate about. And when you look at their Facebook and LinkedIn pages, look for commonalities. Uh, Again, the things that we would train companies not to do is hire based on biases. If for example, I grew up in Western Tennessee, and I went to a little high school that had 300 people, and one of the candidates coming in turns out they went to that same high school, I'm going to have a natural affinity to like this person. I want to talk with them. I'm going to feel something in common with them. I've got a bond already. And that can be true over anything from a sports team to a sport of any particular kind. You like bicycling, they like bicycling, tennis, whatever. Try to find something in common, just so you'll have that if you need it, and just keep it in the back of your mind. It's not that you're going in and just trying to, kiss everybody's butt. That would backfire on you pretty quickly. But it's about taking the time to get to know the people you'll be talking with. It can be especially important around political issues. So, for example, I was the chair of the Electronic Outreach Committee for Sacramento for Obama 4 years ago. If I were going in and interviewing with a group that was maybe an environmental group, but let's just say Republicans for greener energy or something. I mean, every group has their own committees. In fact, the last person who was head of the director of the Department of Conservation out here was a Republican, uh, appointed by Governor Schwarzenegger, and she was a great environmentalist and belonged to, prior to that, to a group on the East Coast that was a Republican-based environmental group. And so I wouldn't want to go in there spending half the time talking about how great it was doing electronic outreach for Obama. While those skills might be important, and I can talk about those just as well without emphasizing that I worked for somebody they were probably opposed to. So those are the little things that could make a difference in how you establish your first relationship with some of these people. Relax, smile, have some nice things to say, but they should be sincere and credible. And whether or not they appear to be and are is again coming back to the research that you do coming in. If you can find some positive things that the company's done lately, where they maybe got some good press over something, or had a new product come out, or the stock has gone up, or anything else that looks good. Maybe they've got a new commercial running, or uh, announced a new sustainable package option, whatever it might be. Have a few positive things that you can say that are related to the organization and are true. So it shouldn't be something where you come in and talk to somebody and compliment them on their great PR campaign when internally they think it was the worst campaign they've ever had. So make sure you've done your homework on this one. Interview information exchange. And this is what I was alluding to earlier when we talked about the interview process. Companies spend a lot of time and a lot of money trying to learn as much as they can about the candidates. They might have them in for an initial hour and then back for a couple more, and then have them meet some more team members. They ask all kinds of things. They for a while out here in California, even they were asking candidates for their face to friend them on Facebook so they can see all their past posts. They wanted access to it. And fortunately, Governor Brown just signed a law into place, I think about a month ago, making that illegal now. But they will look up as much of other information as they can. So part of preparing for an interview is making sure that all of those profiles are in order. Make sure that if you have jobs on your resume, that they also appear on LinkedIn and that the dates match and things like that. Because believe me, clients or hiring managers will go to these profiles and make sure everything matches. Excuse me. They will also Google your name. So you might want to do the same thing and find out what comes up. And if there's anything negative anyway, be prepared to talk about that. Everybody's had, who knows, maybe you were in, college and went out and got drunk some Friday night and your name got in the paper for something that you're not very proud of. But, people understand that kind of thing. But you should know and not be shocked if it does come up. Then it usually wouldn't. And unfortunately, sometimes the reason it wouldn't is that they might decide just based on information they find not to hire you. and not to tell you why because they don't want to end up in some type of legal battle over hiring practices. So just know that those are things that an employer will do, and do them yourself first, so that there aren't any surprises out there. When we talk about behavioral interviewing, again, behavioral interviewing is asking questions of a candidate to find out how they've performed in similar situations and similar jobs. So the premise of it is the best predictor of future performance is past performance in a similar situation. So if and there are different measures of that. How long standing the performance, how close is the situation, and so when interviewers are trying to assess, let's say for example, um, somebody was coming out with a new product that was a sustainable home consumer product. That let's say it was going to make I don't know a totally benign, non-toxic, organic um, dish detergent that you can make from plants you can grow in your own backyard in a week. That kind of thing. So let's say they have some new product that they're going to come out with, and they don't know how it's going to do in the market, but they generally have an idea of who's going to buy it, and they want to hire you to come in and open up that market for them. Well, let's say that in this case, that market was going to be uh, stay-at-home parents who use a dishwasher, or I don't know, you can pick it. So what they would want to do is ask you about times when you've introduced new environmental products into the same market niche. Tell me about when you did it, who you did it for, what was your strategy, what did you use to determine that strategy, how did you devise it, how did you do your research, what type of budget did you have, what type of resources did you have around you to help you do it, what types of things did you do yourself? What types of things did other people do for you? So you can get a feel for what this candidate did in that particular situation, and whether or not they really did the work or they were part of a team that did the work and they only knew how to do one component of it. So you should be prepared to answer those types of questions. And even if they don't ask them that way, I know people that just over the years I've often coached friends who were on the job search and preparing for an interview, and they called me and asked for advice, and I talked with them about this behavioral interview technique and how you could actually turn it around and make your answers stronger. So examples are a strength in terms of selling. And so let's say that the interviewer were to ask you a question about, well, do you know anything at all about marketing consumer products into environmental consumer products in the households? Well, you could say, oh yeah, sure I do. I know a lot about that. You just identify the market, and then you put it together, and you figure out what message has impact, and then you do your branding and get your logos together, and your graphics, and your website, and your e-commerce, and you figure out where these people are hanging out on Facebook and do your social media campaign. So you can talk through the whole thing, or you could say, well, yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, let me tell you what I did over at ABC Company when they faced this exact same problem. And now you walk through and say, here's the situation. They wanted to introduce a new product. They didn't know how to do it. Here was the market. They didn't know where to go. I devised the strategy. I came up with the whole thing myself. I did have a person doing my books and another person doing my graphics. But other than that, I steered the whole campaign, executed it, pulled it all together. And that's what I did. And the results were we went from, zero first year launch to 3 million, the next year 7 million, and the next year 14 million. So telling that story of not only do I know how, but here is what I did and how I did it, one, it gives you something good to talk about because we all know the worst thing in an interview is silence. It feels so uncomfortable for people. And two, it's a stronger selling point than just saying yes. Do you know how to do this? Oh yeah, sure. Well, what sounds better? Oh yeah, sure. Or absolutely. As a matter of fact, over here, the way I did it was, and you tell your story, and stories engage people, and they get them interested in talking, and it gives you a chance to tell them what you've done in a similar situation. So once they see that you've done it before and you know what you're doing, they're more likely to be impressed and feel like you can do it again in their situation. Now, of course, uh, you should also have good questions. And we'll talk about those in a second or two. But then also be prepared to discuss strengths and weaknesses. Um, Almost every company asks that. It's such a standard interview question, and there's a standard what I think is a really ridiculous answer. I always kind of knew what to expect. When I ask people their weaknesses, one of the things you'd hear most frequently is, well, I'm too much of a perfectionist, or I'm just overly committed to my work. Oh yeah, I've won too many Nobel prizes, that kind of thing. They try to toss it back at you as a weakness when really they're pitching you a strength, and I think that usually brings people down a level in my interviews when I'm screening them because it shows a level of one, lack of sophistication because anybody who knows anything can see right through those types of answers, and two, anybody who's not truly in touch and knowing what their strengths and weaknesses are is probably not doing a very good job of overcoming those weaknesses. And I don't want to get too much into psychology here, but there's a basic level of human development. I think it was oh shoot, his name slips my mind now. He's a famous psychologist, and of course there are all these different schools of thought. But basically, it's a level of human development that goes from, for skills, that goes from unconscious incompetence, where you don't know what you don't know. So, say for example, I move into a house that overlooks a golf course, and I've never picked up a golf club before. Then I look outside and see people golfing, and I say, "Oh, that looks really easy. I'll bet I could do that." So that's unconscious incompetence. I don't know that I don't know how to play golf. I think I can. And then I walk out there and I swing the clubs and I miss the ball and hit it into the trees and break a window. And now I've gone from the level of unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence, where suddenly I realize what I don't know. Now, when you get to that position, that's where you can grow and learn. So now let's say I realize what I don't know, and I go take a couple of golf lessons, and I hit the range, and I start practicing and get my form and all of this. And so now I start getting a little bit better. So I went from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence to conscious competence because now I'm thinking about it and I can do it. And then the fourth and final stage is when you get to unconscious competence. When you're so good at it, people say, "Oh, he's so good, he doesn't even need to think about it." And the only time I've ever really seen that was I was living in Chicago when Michael Jordan was in his prime, and I saw him literally hit shots with his eyes closed. I mean, it looked like he wasn't looking, throwing them behind the back, dropping them in the basket. It was incredible. That was unconscious competence. He was so good he didn't even have to think about it. He just put the ball in the basket. And so the most important phase of growth is going from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. Because until you understand what you don't know, you can't grow and learn it unless it's accidentally. And that's the same with weaknesses. If you don't know what your weaknesses are, you have unconscious incompetence, which is not a good place to be. If you know what your weaknesses are, now you've gone from unconscious incompetence around your weaknesses to conscious incompetence. Now at least I know what I'm not good at. And then from there, what do you do with that to develop more as a professional? If you know what you're not good at, figure out tools. So for me, for example, one of the things that I've never been good at is just organizing pieces of paper. Like too much stuff comes in every day, and it ends up in piles on my desk. And then when the pile gets too big, it goes into a pile in a box, and then a pile on the floor, and then I got boxes of papers everywhere, and none of them are organized. It's just a mess. So I'm also a big zero waste advocate. So in December 2009, I made my New Year's resolution to go paper free. Now I used the environmental bent to really push it and sell it to myself that hey, this is why I'm doing it. I'm excited about going paper free, and it worked out great. But the more significant thing in my personal day-to-day life for me, and I'm not talking about the planet, but me and trying to work, is that now I don't lose anything. Since everything is electronic, I can find it in a second. And so one of my weaknesses was being disorganized with paper. I'm an environmentalist, a zero waste advocate, and so by realizing that I'm not good at that and accepting it, I needed to find a tool to help me not let that weaken me and make me, not as good at what I want to do. So I went paper free, and that has helped. Now I don't lose things anymore. I can find any message from anybody. All my voicemail is electronic, and that's what you can do once you know where you need to grow. So when somebody can't give me a good answer on that, I don't think well of them. I don't think badly of them. It just also doesn't help them stand well in my interview process. So think about a few, but be prepared to talk about what you've done to overcome them. So if your weakness is, well, and maybe it is that you tend to work too much because you could do it in a shorter period of time and have a more balanced life. Or maybe it is being disorganized or not returning calls within 24 hours or whatever your standards are. Say what your weaknesses are, but also then follow up with what you've done to overcome them and the tools that you've put in place, knowing that those are weaknesses. So let's say you found yourself, tending to make decisions too quickly without thinking them through. Well, what you've done is you've put a rule in your place that every time you have an important decision to make, you're going to write it down, think through the options, and then come back the next day instead of giving an answer in an hour. Whatever it might be. That might not be a good example, but you get where I'm going with that. Now, you also need to be prepared with good questions yourself. You need to qualify the job, not just have them qualify you. If it's not a good option for you, then you shouldn't take the job. Now, I realize some people are in a position where you've got a mortgage, your house is underwater, you need to make payments, you need a job. Okay, we can't always be picky and think we're going to get our dream job and settle for nothing less. Uh, I just got a flashback to cousin Eddie on Christmas vacation, who was unemployed for like 9.5 years and things, and holding out for his management position. So we don't want to get in the cousin Eddie syndrome. If there's a reasonable job that is going to fit the bill and it looks like it's got some potential, take it, of course. But make sure you know those things, and so you want to ask about um, things that again are, if you think about a consultative sales situation, you have to ask about the problem. What is their current situation? Where would they like to be in the future? Where are they now? Where do they want to go? How would they like to get there? What are the barriers to getting there? And what do they think is needed to get there? And obviously, you hope to be the solution to those barriers and needs. And so, what is the company, the department, personal goals? And that's important. Remember, these are individuals. So, if you're talking to somebody who's a, I don't know, VP of operations, then you might say, where I understand the company is trying to get from here to here. What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? What do you enjoy the most about your work? What makes you get up and come in every day? And you find out what they care about, because obviously that's what they're going to want you to help with. And so a company might have something in their mission statement that includes A, B, C, and D, but the person in operations only cares about C and has never even read the other three since his employee orientation 27 years ago. Then you don't want to spend a lot of time talking about A, B, and D. Talk about the one that matters to that person the most. Then ask them. Don't just tell them what you can do for them. Ask them, where would they like to be? What would they like to most accomplish? If you're going in for whatever the position is, ask them if they could just snap their fingers and have things be different in 6 months. What would look different in 6 months from now, and what would be different a year from now? Because that's what they care about. When you get them answering those types of questions, you're hearing what they care about. And until you can provide the solution to what they care about, you haven't got their attention. And so that's why you want to ask these questions. You want to work them in early in the interview if you can, but in a strategic way. Again, you don't want to appear to be averting answers or avoiding giving an answer. They'll see right through that. So it should be a natural conversation. But it's easy to turn around and get those questions out. So if they were to ask you a question about, can you tell me about your abilities to take a product to market, just sticking to our earlier example, you can start to talk about those abilities and say, well, sure, I've done a lot of product management campaigns before, product management and marketing, where it went straight from starting with consumer focus groups and surveys and industry studies to developing a product that we felt met those needs and then taking it back out for beta testing and walking it through. And then, but as you can answer the question and give some information back, but then close with a question of your own. So you can say, but, so those are the things that I've done, but tell me with, your new product line, it sounds like a really exciting opportunity and a lot of market potential. Of course, I haven't been inside yet to do the research myself, but it seems like you're really onto something here. Where would you like to see this product, 6 months or a year from now? What kind of goals do you have in mind in terms of market share and where you'd like to be? So I've answered their question, and then I've turned around and asked them a question. And now I've got them again talking about what their needs are. And the more you can get them talking about their needs and make them comfortable that you understand their needs, not even that, that it's, I laugh because it's just, I've seen so many crazy things go down in interviews, and companies, how they hire is not really practical. They should be hiring similar to the way they would buy a piece of equipment, where they evaluate everything, they look at studies, and it's hard to do with a person. But they just go to the opposite extreme most of the time, where they get a feel for the person and whether or not they kind of like them and feel good about who they are and would want to work with them every day. And if they've hit those threshold requirements for skills and the threshold level for chemistry, well, they've already got that covered, obviously. Companies will still tend to hire based on better chemistry over better skills unless those skills are really significantly different. Obviously, if you're hiring a computer programmer, they need to understand programming languages. But you might not need somebody who won, some type of Turing Award for most innovative new program in 19. Anything in 19 is probably too old, but you get the point. I just need somebody who knows PHP. I don't need somebody who invented PHP. And so if two people know PHP, one of them invented it, and the other one's just really good and can do everything I need them to, and I like that second person better, I'm probably going to hire the second person. And that's just how I say me, but you get the point. I'm speaking from the perspective of a hiring manager. And so those are important things to know. You got to have good chemistry, and a lot of that comes from asking the right questions and engaging the customer, the client, the hiring manager to talk about what their needs are at a deep enough level that you got an understanding of them and then can respond in a way that presents yourself as the solution to their problems. Easy wins again. What have historically been the biggest challenges to achieving their goals? Based on your experience, what skills are most crucial to success in the position? And again, you're getting them talking about what they think is important. So that, let's say that you're really good at, I don't know, painting yellow flowers and painting blue horses, and you spend half your time uh, talking about how much you like painting blue horses, and you find out at the end of the interview they don't like blue horses, they like yellow flowers. You want to find that out early in the interview and make sure that you're talking about the things that are most important and most interesting to the person that's interviewing you, not what you think is the most interesting about yourself to talk about. There are exceptions. I mean, a lot of this really is feeling out where things are going in an interview. But if you come in prepared with your own questions, ready to discuss your strengths and weaknesses, um, good examples of your past successes, questions here in the back of your mind, or possibly jotted down depending on what you've got available to you. I personally, again, being paper free, I take all my notes on a computer. So the nice thing about that is you can, you have your screen facing you, and you can type, and if you can touch type, you can keep eye contact with that individual, and you could have some notes for yourself on the same page that you're taking your own. You can have your own questions kind of jotted down and ready on your note taking page. So and explain to people early, right when you start the interview, because it still looks socially awkward to people when you're talking to someone and you see them typing on a computer. You feel like, well, why are they interacting with whoever that is instead of me? So I tell people at the very beginning of the meeting, by the way, I'm paper free. I do like to take notes. So if you see me typing either into my phone or into my laptop, and that depends on the situation. I use my phone when I have standing meetings with people. We just start chatting and they start telling me something. I take notes in my phone and let them know that's what I'm doing as part of my paper-free practice. But again, I don't lose those notes, do I? And then I can attach them to the contact. So lots of reasons to go paper-free besides environmental. Anyway, you want to be ready with those questions and ready to take it to the next level. Closing the interview, make sure you thank them, of course, invite them to contact you with any additional questions, express your level of interest. You can ask about the process going forward. You don't want to be pushy. And, again, that's if you appear to be too pushy, you'll put them off. They'll start trying to avoid you the same way they would try to avoid a salesperson for a product they don't want, or a bill collector, or somebody like that. You become an unpleasant nuisance if you're pushy. So that's the last thing you want to do. You do want to feel them out and see how interested they are. And so, but also at the right time. You don't want to ask a closing question before you're ready to close, but that's a whole class in itself. I don't think I mentioned in my intro, I also used to do sales training because we hired so many salespeople that I know the job, I know the mechanics of the job, and how it works and what it takes to be a good salesperson for various types of products, and they are different for each kind of product. A lot of it depends on market maturity and price point. Is it a luxury, high priced item in the market niche, or is it a low priced commodity consumer item? Um, anyway, lots of different things to know about sales that I try to squeeze into this interview process without going too far off course. But express your level of interest, ask about the process going forward. Just simply what is the timeline and next steps? When should I expect to hear from someone? That sort of thing. Request permission to follow up with any additional questions you might have if you after the interview, and then make sure you get a phone and email address from any of the people that you've met. Ideally, a card, or you can come back and maybe they've all been included in an email thread or something like that. Post interview follow up. A brief follow up email to each interviewer thanking them for their time, inviting you to contact you with any additional questions is good. And you can also, when you're talking with these people and you find out what interests them, while you're taking your notes, take that down too. So if somebody says that, well, I'm really interested in where transportation is going in the next century. It seems to be a major problem. I think we're getting on top of the waste issue. People, San Francisco is doing curbside organics, and I think that's going to, so that doesn't concern me as much as this transportation thing. And then you come out of the interview. If I were you, you want to connect, maybe 2 days later, something like that, not right after, but within a day or two, maybe either go out and set up a Google alert, which you might want to do right away actually, but follow up in a couple of days with not something about when can I come back? Are you still interested? Do you want to talk with me? But no, something a bit more personal and connecting that they're going to be interested in. So give them something instead of asking for something. Don't be the nag that calls them and says, hey, when are you going to call me? When am I going to get an interview? Are you going to call me again? Instead, contact them and don't bring up the interview at all. The second time, first you thank them, but then the second time around, maybe you found some article about Daimler Benz and their new artificial intelligence applications, which, by the way, I did a search for Daimler Benz Director of Artificial Intelligence. That's why that one came to mind. But maybe it's one of the new projects that they're working on that is going to be all about driverless vehicles, which they've been working on for years, by the way. 10 years ago, when I filled that position, they were ready to go with a car, but it was interesting, especially at the time, and I could see it now too. They felt like even with a car that had didn't need a driver at all, you could sit in the back seat and take a nap. The way these cars are going to work, that that consumers would still want a steering wheel. They're just not comfortable without a steering wheel to hang on to if they're driving. So anyway, you might find an article of that type of interest, but make sure that it's good. Make sure that it's well resourced, researched, that it comes from somebody credible, because whatever you forward is going to reflect on you. Just like if somebody forwards something really stupid to your Facebook page, you think about it like, oh, why would they bother me with this crap? This is really ridiculous. They really want all these people to see this. I don't, whatever it might be, as opposed to something that's on topic, of interest, and really intelligent. So you might want to forward something that maybe came out of the MIT or Carnegie Mellon or Caltech or Stanford Labs, that is about the newest innovations in artificial intelligence applied to, in this case, it's called intelligent transportation systems. That would be something worth forwarding. And especially if it's green and environmental, of course, on topic to what you were interviewing for. So there's another way to come back and make contact with people. If any of you would like to contact me, here's my contact information. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And I have, I don't know, a lot of LinkedIn connections. So if that's the case and you would like to, whoops, let me get that in the chat box here. If any of you would like to connect on me on with LinkedIn and you a see somebody in my connections that you would like to get introduced to, just let me know and we can forward a resume on for you. That's not a problem. Uh, some of the things that we talked about tonight but didn't really dig into, I would like to make sure we at least look at briefly. And one of them is LinkedIn. LinkedIn we talked about as a research tool. So if any of you don't have a LinkedIn account, I highly recommend it. It really has replaced the resume these days. Um, and I'll go through a little bit of how you can use it just to give you an idea if you've not seen LinkedIn before. You definitely want to set up your own account. And this is my kind of LinkedIn homepage where I'm seeing all the feeds coming in from people. But if I go to my profile, I can either edit it or view the profile. And this is also part of preparing for an interview, by the way. That's why I wanted to make sure we covered this. Well, it's asking this my current position. I'm not going to put yes because I don't want it to inadvertently replace my primary position. I do a lot of different things, so I'm just going to close that box. But you can see here some of the things I have that are current are U.S. Zero Waste Business Council, the NRC, L2 Environmental. I'm a contractor with this group. I help Leslie Lukacs, if any of you know her, with some of her projects. I've also done these things, and it's got my education on here. This is important in terms of preparing for an interview in several ways, not just researching the people that you'll be interviewing with, but also preparing your profile to be viewed by others. And it's so key. I mean, here too, I can see who's now. I do pay for a slightly upgraded version of LinkedIn. That's why I've got these two little icons that you'll see up here. And one of the things that comes with that upgrade is the ability to see people who've looked at my profile. So I can go here and I see that 14 people have viewed my profile in the last 7 days. I can go look and see who those people are to a great degree. So here's, for example, someone in executive leadership function in San Diego for renewables and the energy. Um, Jason Watkins, environmental supervisor at North Carolina Department of Environment. So I can see who these people are. Now, if I were a candidate looking for a job and I noticed that an HR person or an executive director from some organization had been looking at my profile, I might contact them. I can just click a message right here. Most of these people are already connected to me in one way or another. You can see that they're all actually first connections. The other thing I can do is see if I'm attracting people from the areas where I should. And in my case, information technology, environmental services, renewables, that's me. That's what I'm all about. So I know my page is optimized to pull those people in from those types of searches, and that's what I'm after. Um, so make sure your profile's in shape. But now, in terms of research, and by the way, you can also use all these job tools. And I'm not going to spend much time on those right now because we do that in a different webinar where we talk about using social media to identify job opportunities. But what you can do is search for other people. So let's say that I don't know. Let's say that I'm going to be interviewing with somebody named Fred Smith. I have no idea. I'm sure there's 800 Fred Smiths on here. I'll just pull up the first one that comes up. What a coincidence. We've got a shared connection. So if I pull up Fred Smith, and I really don't know this person, I just randomly pulled that name off the top of my head. So I could go in and see what they're all about. That they've been a product facility manager for this company. I can see that they're part of the Sacramento Area Sustainable Business Association. Now, I didn't know that existed. So if I wanted to, now I don't know if I can. I'm in so many groups, it might not let me join. It wants me to sign in. Oh, yeah, reached or exceeded my number or pending groups. So anyway, that is a limitation of LinkedIn. Now I can go through and strategically uh, switch groups. So if I were really looking for a job in this area, and I saw that there's this group called Sustainable Businesses of Sacramento, I would want to join that group because you can't normally connect with people you don't know unless you've got some other affiliation with them. One of the ways to do that is through a group. So if you see somebody you want to connect with and they belong to a group and you can't get um, you can't get to them directly, join the group first and then look for things that they're, posting about and what the company's posting about and start contributing some intelligent, you know, something else that you can add to the conversation. And eventually you'll be able to connect with them. Once you've got a little dialogue going, then message them offline. Say, hey, I really enjoyed what you were talking about regarding intelligent transportation systems. By the way, here's some of my background. I'm looking for a position in the industry, and I've noticed you've got something open at your organization. Would you mind if I gave you a call and just talked with you a few minutes so that I can see who I should talk with over there about this position? Very non pushy, very casual, very relaxing. Um, Not a lot of pressure, not a sales job, not asking for an interview. The easiest way to get an interview is don't call it an interview and don't think about it like an interview. But talk with somebody and just uh, tell them you've heard that there's a position open. And I mentioned, or at least I think I flashed on the screen, a concept called the takeaway. Well, it's a really strong technique if it's handled correctly. And this is done in sales situations, and it has to be used right, or it will backfire on you. But there's a way to do it correctly and honestly, where it's not a technique. It's really a part of a dialogue and part of a conversation and a part of creating and keeping a level playing field and being honest with yourself and the employer. If the job is not right for you, don't take it. Don't take it. If it's not right, if they need skills that you don't have and you can't learn really quickly, like you've already kind of got most of it, but you can figure out the rest in the first week, don't take the job. You won't be happy. They won't be happy. You'll probably be terminated eventually or quit and not have a good feeling, not leave good relationships behind. It's not a good thing. So if a job is not right for you, you should be the first one to say, I'm sorry, this is not right for me. Now, if you really want to see the chemistry and the leverage of an interview change, if early on in the interview you can get in that kind of a statement, like for example, well, it sounds like you've really got some challenges here on your hands, and they're really interesting. But I wonder if I might ask you a few questions because believe me, the last thing I would want to do is accept a position that I'm not qualified for. So if it's okay, I'd like to ask you a few questions about the position, about the skill sets that are needed, about the types of things you'd like to accomplish, so that I can really assess that versus my skill set and decide if this is a conversation that we should probably continue. When they hear that, when you're ready to walk away, if they don't give you the right answers, you would not believe how that can change the dynamics of an interview. It can go from um, a person trying to basically make you sell them on your qualifications to them selling you on how great this job is. And I'm telling you, it works. And I laugh because I've seen it, and it seems so obvious to me, but I've seen it so many times in action. I mean, I used to sit in on a lot of interviews with clients, and then I would coach them a little bit after the interview. Or more importantly, if it's during the interview and these things are happening, I would kind of take over. But it happened over and over again with really sophisticated and well educated people. When you do the takeaway, it's about saying, well, okay, you're here to see if I'm good enough for you. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm not so sure this is right for me. And then it's like, well, what do you mean it's not right for you? Sure it is. It's a great company. It's a great job. Let me tell you how good it is. Did I tell you about our benefits? I'm sure you can do it. But not literally like that, but you get the idea. And so it's important to just know that concept, but don't use it as a, it's so easy to blow something to blow an interview when you try to use something as a tactic when it's not really honest, sincere, and natural. When it is, it works great. When it's not, you sound again like a used car salesman, and they're not going to want to work with you. You should never try to be manipulative. It's just about really doing that. I mean, you heard me as we started talking about this subject. You really don't want to take a job that is not a good fit for you. And you aren't going to know if it's a good fit unless you ask them about the challenges, what resources they have available, Suppose you were successful marketing this other product out into the consumer world that was this green household consumer product we talked about earlier, and you had a budget of 250,000, and you had your graphics person, and you had a staff assistant, and you actually had somebody out cold calling and setting up leads for you, so that you could go out and talk to certain companies, or you worked through an association that sponsored you, or you got one new retailer on board. Whatever it might be, if those skills aren't the same skills that are going to work in that other job, you don't want to take the job. So anyway, well, I don't mean that. If you don't have the skills, maybe you do have different skills. You get the point. And so it's important to assess those things for yourself. Know your strengths and weaknesses. Know what the company needs. And suppose you've got the skills and you think you can do it, and then you ask them what their budget is, and they say, well, we think we have 10,000 for the first year and 20,000 for the second year, and you know from your past experience that it's going to take at least $200,000 the first year and 300,000 the second year just to break into the market using the technique you've used before. Well, then there's an example of where it might sound like you know how to do it and sound like you can, and it might sound like something that you want to do, but then you find out you had zero resources. And if you ask about what the biggest challenges have been in the past to accomplishing these goals, that will often point you to the problem. And they might not even recognize it. But when you can identify the problem that they might not even recognize, you're going to be in a far better position to determine whether or not you've got the skill sets to help them overcome that problem. I see we're running a couple minutes past our scheduled time, so I apologize for that. I see a question coming in. Okay, what if you have gaps in in this question I'll read aloud for everyone. What if you have gaps in your employment history and don't feel comfortable listing all that on LinkedIn? Can I just summarize my work experience, leaving out dates of employment? LinkedIn, I believe, requires years. You can leave things out. That's not a problem. I mean, people will ask though, so you might want to uh, think about the things you did do during that time, and see if there's something that you could put in there. LinkedIn is where a lot of people will go. I'd be prepared to to talk about those gaps, but they aren't always a negative either. A lot of people have good reasons for them, and whether or not they're relevant also may depend on how long ago and that sort of thing. Sometimes people do things for various reasons, and it shouldn't play a role. But I know that it does, and a lot of times it too depends on the employer. Okay, but just make sure the most important thing is that the dates match. Either if you left them blank, leave them blank in both places, but don't have one set of dates on one thing and another set on the other thing. It's important to be honest, and open about these things, and consistent. So while it's okay to some degree to not be out there in the open about everything. I mean, nobody walks in airing their dirty laundry in the first part of an interview, and you may not ever need to. But just make sure that you're also being totally truthful and honest. There's a way to package things in a certain way that presents them in the light you want them to be seen, while still being 100% factually honest. And that's the right way to do it. And then Google Alerts I'd mentioned before. I want to make sure I point those out. If you just Google Alerts or go to google.com/alerts, you can type anything you want in here and set up how often you want to get those results. And Google will automatically look out at the internet and what else is going on out there and try to it will send you a report every day of everything that comes up on those search terms. So if I were going out to interview with Jane Smith, CEO of Widget Company, then I might want to set up a Google alert, Jane Smith, CEO of Widget Company, or just Jane Smith, or just Widget Company, or all of those things, so that I start getting daily alerts of anything that pops up. I personally do this with a lot of my friends in the business, a lot of my friends that are, I don't know, they're in kind of high profile positions in either government or industry, because I want to be able to congratulate them when they're in the press for something. And it happens a lot. There have been numerous occasions where I get a Google alert that has an article in USA Today or Wall Street Journal that includes a friend of mine, and I see it before they do. So before Wall Street Journal even hits the stands, I've already got a Google alert telling me it's showing up on the Wall Street Journal, and I can grab that piece and email my friend and say, "Hey, congratulations, saw your article, way to go, keep pushing it forward." And that's what Google alerts will do for you. I do that for friends just because I like staying in touch with my friends and knowing what they're up to and seeing what kind of successes they're having. But you can also do that with companies and do it with people that you're interviewing with and that sort of thing. Your industry, if you're looking for a position, as a director of sustainability for an organization, set up a Google alert, director of sustainability, and see what comes out of it. Start connecting through LinkedIn with people who already are directors of sustainability. Um, you still want to start networking in the circles of people where you'd like to be working and staying in tune with what's going on in the job front there. And by the way, setting those things up on LinkedIn as well, you can even find out when people have left positions, and that might create openings. And then also, of course, use Twitter, which we didn't even talk about here tonight, but we will have more webinars in the future covering those things. Anyway, I thank all of you for joining me. We had a good turnout tonight, I see, and that's especially impressive considering we're going up against Monday Night Football, the San Francisco Giants in a Game 7, and the presidential debates. So I appreciate y'all being here with me and hope that this has been helpful. Good luck, everyone. If you've got any other questions, feel free to email me, bob@themobiusnetwork.com. You've got that there in your chat box if you want to copy it out. And again, you're welcome to find me and connect with me on LinkedIn, where I can help you connect to over 11 million professionals through my 1,300 plus direct connections. That'll do it for this evening. Again, hope this is useful, and thank you all for attending.